Welcome to Dream Machine. My name is Arun.
And my name is Patricia.
And once again, we've removed the rust off the Dream Machine. We've kicked it up into fifth gear, and we are rolling and rolling again. So, yeah. So, Patricia, you ready to go on this wild ride?
Yes, let's get trolled.
Yeah, well, I don't know, we may be getting trolled, but, we're going on a tour. So,
yes.
A world
tour. That way we can troll others.
Yeah. So, and also that it's going to rock us like a hurricane, and it's going to be going along the rails on a crazy train. So, and if you think this whole intro is a bit crazy, well, stick around. We're going to tell you why.
Yes.
Trolls World Tour is the 2020 release, and it comes in a very obscure time. This was due for actually a cinematic release, but unfortunately, because of current events currently going on, it was decided that it was going to be released online on streaming, and so it's basically been on Google Play, it's been on YouTube, it's been on Sky Cinema, it's basically been out there for renting. So, and yeah, it's basically it's going to be the sequel to the Trolls movie that we reviewed earlier a couple of years, I think it was a couple of months ago, actually, thinking about it now.
Yeah, and as of the recording of this podcast, it is currently the Universal Studios' most successful day one rental. It is currently number one on video on demand out of all the other movies that are out right now. So that just goes to show you that video on demand, people are wanting it, and they're wanting it immediately because they probably have nothing new else to watch, especially since they cannot go outside to watch it in a movie theater.
Well, we're going to have an interesting discussion, I think, at the end of this movie. But anyway, people actually wanted to actually discuss about Trolls World Tour. So going into it, I actually liked the premise, to be honest with you.
We did. We did like the premise.
So, so the idea is that there's these rock trolls that are going to be going out and basically turning the whole troll world into basically devouring it by playing rock and roll, and which is was kind of cool for me at the same time. But then looking back at it, it's like I was thinking about this, we're going to be all worried because rock and roll might take over the world, and my next response was like, okay, boomer. It's just, it was, so, I mean, don't get me wrong, I actually love the whole, I'm a metalhead, I love rock, I love Tenacious D, I love Slayer, I love Judas Priest, I love AC/DC, and I love I love the Scorpions as well, and also there's this band called Love Hate as well that's out there too, that's this really cool song called Spinning Wheel, so, I'll, whether it's Enter Sandman, whether it's, whether it's Guns N' Roses, I love the whole metal scene. And I think it's really cool. And Nevada, I think, was obviously, this is still celebrated all the way to this day. Even though it was, such all these bands as well. They came from the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. So for me, Trolls World Tour at least tried to make somewhat of an effort to try and say that, hey, there might be something in this for me. And so, dare I say there probably was, but I gotta basically just describe Trolls World Tour as basically this: a colorful mess.
It is an over-the-top, insane mess. There is so much going on in this movie. There's 2 or 3 plot points going on. There's mixed messages. In the first movie, we were talking about how it is such a colorful, happy world, and all that kind of stuff. And the villains, maybe they could have gotten more development. Maybe they were just too overbearing. Everything about it was just so sickeningly sweet. And it was up there at number 5 in our top 5 worst DreamWorks movies. And we were like, oh man, they got to do better if they're going to do a sequel. And when we saw the trailer, we even discussed about it when we saw Abominable. We were kind of excited about it. It's like, oh, wow. So we have this rock and roll troll who's going to take over everything music related. And I was like, we're intrigued. This sounds really interesting.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, like that stuff, doesn't equate to like a complete package.
Yeah. So, I mean, going into this, I mean, one thing I just kind of like turned me off Trolls World Tour was when they decided to kind of like, did you notice like halfway through like the promotion of this film, they decided to change the logo? And yeah,
Yeah.
they changed it from like the Metallica logo, or to like they changed it from like the Rock logo to like this kind of like really sickening kind of like little like rainbow coloring kind of like thing. And I don't know if it's because like, oh hey, we're gonna do like different bunch of promotions, but when they finally started promoting the movie like as it started to become released, they then just started to swap back to the Metallica logo, which
Maybe
was
the
kind of.
reason why is because maybe they felt that maybe Metallica would have sued them for like, rights or something like that. It's like, oh, you can't do the same logo that looks similar to
No,
ours.
no,
Maybe
no,
they thought,
they went
oh,
back. No, they went back to that logo. So
no, I
like,
know. I'm just
yeah.
saying, like maybe at first they were afraid that they were going to be sued, but then Metallica was like, nah, we don't
Well,
care.
we don't know
Maybe
we don't know that for a fact. So like, I mean, we don't know what
sure,
Metallica was thinking at the time. I don't think it even has anything to do with that. I think it was just purely just like, oh hey, we need to get this demo, but oh hey, maybe it's not working out so well, so let's go back. I'm not too sure. It was something that was going on during DreamWorks' whole like promotion campaign. I think for trying to get this
sure.
movie released, but and then obviously we had the coronavirus that came and basically closed down every single theater pretty much across the whole planet. So this gave DreamWorks a pretty awkward place to go. I mean, do they delay Trolls World Tour, or do they actually go ahead and release it? And they decided to release it, and so now it's been available online for everyone
And
to download.
it's become pretty successful because of it.
Yeah, it has, but I mean, well, again, like I'll talk about that at the end once we're done with the actual movie itself. So, the idea is that our heroes are now basically singing and dancing in their own troll world, but then they find out that there's actually more trolls that are out there in this whole world. But it's actually introduced to us in like the beginning of the movie before obviously we get the Trolls World Tour intro and things like that. So apparently there's like these techno reef trolls that we get introduced to, which is kind of like weird because it's kind of like I mean, are these supposed to be trolls or are they supposed to be mermaids?
Yeah, they almost look like the Snorks in a way.
Oh
If
god,
you
the
remember
Snorks.
the
Oh, I remember the
yeah.
Snorks. Yeah, there's a funny story about the Snorks. Like, I only was made aware of them after they crossed over with the Smurfs. Like, if before, like, if you asked me, like, hey, you ever heard of the Snorks? Like, no, I would not have been made aware of them until I saw that episode with them, obviously, crossing over with the Smurfs, and then after that, we found out about the Snorks. But for me, yeah, you're just looking at these little alien kind of things, like they're making fun of the whole like, oh hey, you gotta wait for the beat to drop and things like that. But to me it was just like, it was colorful to look at, but it didn't make a whole lot of sense. And I think it was kind of like
Yeah, I mean, now here's the thing. Like, I know that the trolls are based off of a toy line. Now, I mean, I knew about the original trolls when I was a kid, like the ones with like the really big poofy hair and the big, plastic eye and all that stuff. I know they have new versions of trolls. Maybe there is an underwater equivalent nowadays, but yeah, that was really weird when we first saw it. It's like, really? They're taking place like, what did you describe it? Like Finding Nemo if it was tripping on acid or something?
yeah, something like that. But yeah, actually, it was. Oh yeah, I remember now. It was like if Finding Nemo and what was the other reference I made? It was like, yeah, if he was like on LSD or something like that. Yeah, I made some kind of reference like that. But yeah, it was. But then obviously we got the rock trolls who came in, which I don't mean like I don't know if they can like breathe underwater or something like that, or some kind of
Yeah, that's a
goofiness.
good question. Yeah, like can trolls breathe underwater? Yeah, that's a good question because they were able to walk around just fine, even though they're not from the techno world. They're from the rock and roll world where they have a giant volcano. So I don't know, but
Yeah.
yeah. So apparently, the rock queen, who's known as Barb, she comes along and goes over to the techno king, and he's like, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" And she's comes to them and says, like, "I want your string because we're gonna turn everything into rock and roll. You don't even have real music. All you have is beeps and boops." So so she essentially like does her rock you like a hurricane moment, and then he completely destroys everything, takes the string, and then she just goes off into the next world. And that's pretty much what goes on throughout the movie.
The one thing I do like about this, and I will not be ashamed to say this, I did actually kind of sing along with like all the rock themes because, like, Crazy Train and Rock You Like a Hurricane, and at least they got the classics right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like, so, I mean, I give props to Rachel Broom because, I was actually looking through. I actually, it was at the point where I was actually wanting to look through, like, her resume, like, what she actually done anything in the metal scene. But no, she's actually not. She's actually new to this. Actually,
yeah,
so,
she is.
Yeah.
Most people would probably know who Rachel Bloom is if you ever watched the CW series Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, where she kind of like plays as the main character in there, and she also co-created the show. So she's she has like her mixture of comedy and drama and all that stuff. So she did an amazing job at this. I mean, Barb is actually she was like my favorite character in this because she was just so enjoyable.
It was funny. Like, I really thought, I was saying to myself, oh, Justin Timberlake's going to get me through that movie. But I mean, when you really think about it, like, he was such a side character in all of this. Like,
he was.
Yeah, like, if I had Justin Timberlake in a movie, like, he would be doing far more than what he did in this movie. To be honest with you.
Yeah, and you know what? Remember when we were talking last year about how Abominable gave me Up vibes when I described to you like the story? You know what this movie kind of almost sort of reminded me of?
Go for it.
Frozen 2.
Wow. In what sense?
Okay. So here's the thing. So here's the part of the story where, we have Branch, who's wants to confess his love to Poppy. So it's like Kristoff wanting to confess his love to Anna. And then they go into this completely different world that they had no idea on. And then they learn about this, backstory about like, why didn't we learn about all the other music? And it's like, oh, but then there's this other side of the story in which it turns out that Poppy's father actually was the one who took all of the strings and wanted to make everything pop, as opposed to like, Elsa and Anna's grandfather who wanted to essentially, control the magic and, wanted to take advantage over to the other island. So it's almost like same.
Well, actually, if you think about it also as well, it was almost like Fall Ragnarok, when they find out that, oh, hey, the whole king this entire time actually was a bit of an arsehole who actually, went around and actually, stole everything that he actually gained, So, like,
exactly.
There was, this movie did borrow from very unusual sources, but I guess Frozen 2, wouldn't be too unusual, given the fact that it kind of like, it kind of incorporates the genre. In a way.
Sure.
And by the way, we're not those type of people who say, like, it's for kids, so it's forgivable. Like, we've seen...
we're not.
We've seen some pretty bad kids movies, okay? And, we've been through pretty much this whole argument of, like, it's for kids. It's a lame excuse for something for it to be terrible.
Yeah, and we are pretty objective in this show, so if we see something, we're going to point it out, and we're not going to, say, oh, but, the kids will enjoy it. I'm sure that we can slightly forgive it. It's like, no, we can't do that.
Not here.
If something is bad, we're going to point it out. And oh boy, like throughout this entire movie, I hated Poppy so much. I just was so infuriated every time that I saw her do a stupid decision. I was just like wanting to go up into the screen and just tell her, listen to everybody around you. You are a naive idiot.
Yeah, I think that was like what they were aiming for. I think the fact that she doesn't listen to other people, and then it comes to the at the final third that they say, oh, hey, your big thing is that you haven't listened to people, so that's the reason why you get into all these confrontations and things like that. Yeah, it was like, it was very, obviously they didn't make it very obvious. They made it too obvious on the screen. I think that was the big problem with it. And the nice thing about it as well is that, I don't know about you, but I just feel like the way that they went about, giving this whole... this whole character, this kind of like evolution, they kind of threw it all the way at the very end, because it was kind of like the father figure of the troll people kind of went up to her and said, oh, I'm really glad you didn't listen to me. Like, I'm pretty much like, because he's been holding saying, oh, you don't know what's out there, it's all dangerous, we don't know what these trolls are like. And then all of a sudden it's kind of like, they turn around and say, oh, hey, I'm really glad you didn't listen to me, because, then you discovered all these trolls. It's kind of like, it's a really mixed message that they sent
It
out
is
there.
very mixed. Throughout the parts of the story where we got to see the different worlds of the trolls. We got to see the country world, we got to see the techno world, we got to see the classical world, and a whole bunch of other worlds. And when we got over to the funk world, that was when the king and queen talked about like how separate we are and how different we are. And then, the one thing that they were talking about throughout the movie is, where Poppy is trying to force pop music to everybody, especially when they go over to the country section. It's like, but music is supposed to make you happy. Music is supposed to be lively. When, she hears the mayor of the country world, Delta Dawn, performed by Kelly Clarkson, sing, Born to Die, where, they're talking about like, how incredibly depressing it can be. And, that's the thing that a lot of people seem to overlook when it comes to music. It's like, music comes from so many different sources. It comes from different backgrounds. It comes from different cultures. It comes from different emotions. If you want to talk about something incredibly sad, you go to jazz, blues, I meant. You go to blues, you go to country. You go to like soft ballad. If you want something that like represents a certain culture, like really expressively, you go to hard rock, you go to hip hop, you go to rap. Like the whole thing about like, we're all separate, but then we're kind of all the same kind of thing. It's like, yes, it sounds different and it comes from different backgrounds and all kind of stuff. But then they're saying like, throughout the movie, it's like, oh, they stole from each other. It's like, music comes from similar sources. It's just the way they're executed.
Yeah. And by the way, like, you can see that they were trying their best to incorporate, like, all these different genres. Like, they were trying to get in funk and, like, they were kind of mixing it in with, like, rap and, like, R&B and things like that in, like, one world. And then they were, like, mixing it all up in all the other worlds as well. Like, you could definitely say that the rock was also kind of, like, mixed around as well because, there's, like, different versions of, like, metal and rock and things like that, which is, very different from one another. And, but Pop's obviously everything, which they were making fun. I think they were making fun of in the movie as well. Like, it's like, oh, hey, Pop's just taken from like all the other things and just made it into like its own thing, but
like Queen Barb was mentioning in the movie when she got the invitation from Poppy, it's like, oh, I'd love for us to come over and for us to be best friends. I'm gonna give you lots of presents and hugs. And then she was like ripping the invitation, saying like pop music is bland and is manufactured and there's just no soul or passion into it. It's essentially like a marketing gimmick. It's like, oh, look at us, we're so bubbly and happy and we're going to be postered up into everybody's walls and everybody's going to be so obsessed with us and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it just is like, it's, one thing I will give credit for Trolls World Tour, like, it was kind of making fun of itself at times, which I was kind of like, oh, hey, maybe we've, maybe we've got some kind of self-awareness kind of going on here, but it's just unfortunately that the characters and just the way that the world kind of works is just so messy that you kind of like, you don't really appreciate that. There's too many. The one thing I'll say about this movie, the negatives of this movie are far too distracting. They really are. Like, the fact that the whole thing looks like a kind of like a colorful mess, like they threw like loads of colors everywhere. On top of that as well, the computer technology that they used in this was also distracting as well, because you could tell that the computer was struggling to keep up, because you could tell that the frame rate at certain times was dropping, when there was too many elements on the string for the computer to handle and to actually to do that. And I have no idea if it's something to do with the fact that it was being streamed or something like that. I don't know. To be fair, if that's part of it and they had to like, I don't know, they had to like condense it down to like, it fit that type of thing, then, fair enough. Like, it was, it's basically like, when we complained about Hey Arnold the movie, when it was like, it was a movie that was meant for TV that got stretched up onto the screen. I mean, are we seeing the reverse of that here with Trolls World Tour? It's a movie that was supposed to be on the big screen and it was like, contrasted down to basically be streamed across, platforms, when it wasn't really supposed to be shown in that material. I don't know. Like, maybe if someone gets the Blu-ray release, maybe we'll probably see if that's going to be, far more, capable than, like, the streaming release. I don't know. But for me, like, you could tell that, the visuals were somewhat struggling, even though at times when, everything kind of settled down and, like, you were able to focus on a couple of things, like, then it was becoming tolerable at times. But, it was, oh, by the way, what was the character's name that had the 4 legs, who went on his own story arc to go find his, like, his funk world or something like that? Like, it was...
was it Hickory?
Hickory, maybe it was Hickory, but...
oh, no, not Hickory.
No, Hickory was Hickory was like the... that character.
Yeah, I know what you're referring to. Yeah. What was that guy's... I know who you're referring to. Was it... what was it like
Yeah, yeah,
Cooper? I think it was Cooper.
maybe it was Cooper, yeah. But like that character, like they look like they were trying to give him his own story arc, but like they didn't really give him enough screen time for you to kind of like care about it. And then at the whole end of the arc, they kind of like just said, oh yeah, he was like he was dropped in an egg in and he just fell into pop world, and he basically became he was brought up in pop, but now he actually is funk or something like that. Like
Yeah.
they kind of just tossed it away like a throwaway thing, like just for like a 10-second segment. And it was kind of like that in itself could be like a short or like a story in itself. Of Cooper trying to find him who he is. That's a big story. Like
that is a big story.
It is huge. Like we campaigned for a whole movie in the Hey Arnold Save the Jungle movie campaign, and like there's been other movies out there. Finding Dory, for crying out loud, that was a movie that that was that had its whole movie. That in itself could be one thing, but the messiness of this movie just shows how that's been lost in translation and how you be able to kind of like feel about it. Like it's just
and then also Biggie was kind of like shoehorned into the movie. Like he was there, then he left for a few minutes, and then he came back, and like that character just was like, why was he there? I mean, he was there to basically try to be all happy and positive, and then he was like scared because everything was so different to him. That whole thing was just kind of off. But yeah, you're right. Cooper's story, where it was kind of like building up, where he was going to find himself because he looked so much different than the other trolls. And we saw him walking through the plains, and we saw him walking through the desert, and then he was abducted by an alien ship, and I was like, wait, what's going on here? What is this? Because here's the thing, like aside from all of that, there are some really strange, trippy moments that are like they're almost like Gumball, the amazing world of Gumball, where it kind of like mixes in like weird animation styles and some bits of live action, like the scene where
when you get
Biggie's,
the one of the
thing.
bounce there was the bouncy hunter who was like supposed to be representing soul and jazz and things like that.
Oh my god, the Kenny G troll, I like to call it.
It's
just like, that was so weird. Like, what was that about?
It was like, and also about that as well, like, smooth jazz never made me feel that way at all. Like, like there's radio stations out there that are dedicated to this stuff, and like people like there's a big fan base for that kind of stuff.
I mean, here's the thing. I know what they were trying to do. How Kenny G, whenever he plays, his saxophone, where it sounds like very smooth and it's very comforting and all that stuff, and people are drawn into it. I think they were trying to make a joke. I think they were trying to make a Kenny G joke for children. Like,
but
who's gonna know that reference?
Yeah, but like, come on, this is a guy playing soul music, to soothe your soul. No, he's not Car from the Jungle Book, like I just felt like, that just rubbed me the wrong way quite a lot, and and then there was also that scene in which when Biggie's worm thing, like it was like almost about to die, and then it was ascending up into heaven, where it was essentially like another worm. It would look like Monty Python's Flying Circus. Yeah, I don't believe they made that reference.
I'm like, what? And then finally it was like falling down back into Earth, and he's like, oh, I should have. Damn it, I was so close to getting into heaven. Like,
well, he tried to escape,
man.
at least, good on him for trying, but
Sure.
It's on top of that as well, like, it's just, there's so much throwaway in this movie as well. Oh, I was so disappointed with Ozzy Osbourne's performance in this movie. I really
me too,
was.
because he had barely any lines. I mean, he played as Queen Barb's father, but he was mostly in a wheelchair mumbling to himself because he was senile.
Here's the thing about this. On top of that as well, he didn't do all that much interest on the... I mean, obviously his entrance was pretty funny when he was coming out of the porta potty, to fireworks and smoke and things like that. I mean, that was kind of like hilarious in itself. But unless you knew that was Ozzy Osbourne, that wouldn't have been all that funny. To be honest with you, like, I would have loved it if he, like, I don't know, and I get this will be a pretty crazy reference for a movie like Trolls World Tour. Imagine if he took like, that little bat thing that that was flying around and stuff like that.
Oh my god, I know what you're referring.
Imagine if he grabbed it and tried to bite the head off it, and like Barb was like, no, don't do it. Like, that would have been hilarious. I would have loved that. Exactly.
Oh my god, like I wish I would have. That would have been so great.
funny. Yeah, exactly. And like, it's like they had all this opportunity. Little Nicky did it, for crying out loud. Like, why couldn't they do it? I mean, what, they couldn't? No one's watched. I mean, I guess maybe some people haven't watched that Adam Sandler movie. Many people don't. But I mean, like, they couldn't make some genuine Ozzy Osbourne references in this, besides playing Crazy Train, which he didn't even sing. Rachel Bloom sang it. And like, you know, like they.
No, here's the thing.
Just this one last thing.
Sure.
You know, with me and Patricia right now, we're going through Father Ted, the British series done by Dermot Morgan. But you know, the thing about that is like, I was trying to see if there's like anything like kind of like Father Jack like about him. You know, like Father Jack Hackett, who like sits in the chair and makes drunken absurdities and things like that. Like, I was hoping maybe he'd do something kind of like that to make him kind of like, you know, make him somewhat funny, but no, he's just docile and just kind of sits in his chair, and we're expecting just to kind of be deadbeat humor with this guy. But you know, as far as I'm concerned, Ozzy Osbourne can be hilarious when he's pretty deadbeat and things like that. But you know, it's to me, like, you know, when you're doing a movie like Trolls World Tour, you know, like, which is like going off the rails and things like that. You know, you want Ozzy Osbourne to be a little bit crazy in this, and like, to me, it was like he just looked so old in this movie, and like it was it would have been, you know, it's just so sad because like, on top of that as well, this is I know I'm constantly complaining about this, that, and the other, but you know, Ozzy Osbourne is the only rock and metal reference voice actor in this movie. Like, you know, where's Jack Black? Where's everybody else? Gene Simmons would have been pretty fun for this movie. Maybe even Roger Waters, for crying out loud. Like, any rock or metal legend that they could have got. Maybe they went after them and maybe they said no, then fine, fair enough. At least you made an effort to do it. But like, I would have really loved to have seen some more, you know, rock and metal guys like playing trolls in this movie. I think that would have been pretty awesome if they got all of that.
That would have been really interesting for sure. Now, the one thing I was going to mention during the discussion about the king, Queen Barb's father, was that, you know, he was senile, and you can tell that, you know, he loves rock and roll, similar to Queen Barb. It would have been really interesting if maybe, you know, he was the one who kind of like gave Queen Barb that idea like throughout the beginning, and then once he grew old and senile, like, you know, she wants to be able to respect her father's wishes of having rock all over the world. I mean, like, we already know what the backstory was like towards like the middle half of the movie, in which, like, you know, the pop trolls pretty much took over because they thought that pop music was superior, so they took their separate strings away. And so essentially, you know, deja vu all over again, where, you know, they want to reunite with rock and roll. And so, you know, the Queen Barb was mentioning about, like, you're a queen, you know, you want to be treated with respect, you want people to listen to you, you want to give the people what you want, you want to be able to you know, protect them and all that kind of stuff. And she brought that up when she captured Poppy and put her in jail. Yeah. And I thought that was actually a really interesting point, because throughout this entire movie, I was not convinced by the slightest that Poppy would have made a really good queen, because there was no protection of the, you know, the pop trolls whatsoever. She didn't go back to it the moment that she knew that there was danger ahead. And also throughout this entire time, when we clearly knew that there was danger, like, she threw the manual away for the balloon, even though she didn't have a clue on how to drive it. Then there was also putting too much trust into people that she didn't even know. Like Hickory, for example, the country centaur. You know, we find out later on that they're actually yodeling bounty hunters. And, you know, she was just so naive of like showing off her string. And then finally Queen Barb grabbed it and then just threw her in. And then there was just a bunch of like...
There's one other thing as well, which is that with Ozzy Osbourne, I mean, like, they were kind of like playing up to the fact that, remember when he was kind of like singing along with like one of the pop songs and Barb was trying to tell her to stop it? I thought they were building up to the fact that, hey, maybe Ozzy Osbourne back in the day actually did jam with like other trolls from like other things, and like he was maybe he was gonna like do this whole thing where it's kind of like he was gonna stop Barb from like taking over the world and just saying, hey, look, all you guys, stop being such a bunch of bleeping imbeciles and listen to what I have to say. Back in the day, there was a time that trolls all got together and, you know, all sang together and things like that. And I thought, you know, they were building up to like Ozzy Osbourne like doing like this kind of like heartfelt speech, and it was kind of like, you know, like, so, You know, and yeah, again, I just feel disappointed that Ozzy Osbourne just didn't get all that much of a push in this movie when I think he really deserved it, to be honest with you.
Exactly. And you know what? I mean, instead, you know how like toward the end of the movie in which when Poppy made that speech about like, you know, music should unite us together and all that kind of stuff. And then the drummer said, Barb, I kind of agree with her. It should have been the father who would have said that. Like maybe, like you know, he would have remembered the times in which the kings, were united as one, and they had their own string. Like you know, if Poppy's father wasn't going to say anything, which he didn't, he was just like in the background. Then the king of rock and roll should have said something. I mean, we already knew about the king and queen of funk. We already knew about the mayor of country town.
The idea is that, I mean, the idea of Queen Barb is that she's kind of like also like kind of like in Queen Poppy's shoes as well. But obviously, and on top of that as well, they played that pretty badly too, in my opinion. Like, you know, like I thought at one point they were going to have this whole kind of like heartfelt thing of like Queen Barb and Queen Poppy, like kind of like talking with one another, saying, you know, you don't know how hard this is. You know, I'm like, you know, I'm the queen of this whole thing. I'm supposed to look tough. I'm supposed to look, you know, hard, and I'm supposed to basically, you know, kind of out top the other queens or kings that have come before me. And so I've got a lot of responsibility on my hands. And Poppy could have turned around and said, hey, look, I'm going through exactly the same thing right now. And maybe they could have had that moment, maybe. And it's like, yeah. And like,
but they didn't really. And another thing that was just so haphazardly, and we complained about this in Frozen 2, was that there was a whole subplot of Branch confessing his love to Poppy. But then throughout the movie, he was saying that, man, we're just so completely different. Like, I don't think we can get along because we have absolutely nothing in common. You don't listen to me, and you trust people too much, and I'm the complete opposite. And then they just split off, and that was pretty much it. And they wouldn't like really get together until like almost towards the end of the movie, where you know Branch said, "I love you," and then it's like, "I love you too," and that was it.
Yeah, like it's almost like they. I mean, what was Justin Timberlake's whole thing in this movie? Like it was basically he just tagged along with Poppy and made sure that, you know, she didn't do anything too stupid, but at the same time he was still annoyed by her stupid antics, and some of what he was saying to her was pretty much justified in a way. And so like, you know, if anything,
another thing I can think of was that, you know, he confronted the other bounty hunters. He confronted the K-pops versus the reggaeton bounty hunters, which was freaking stupid. I was so disappointed because I love K-pop and I enjoy reggaeton in some aspects, even though that, you know, it's kind of filthy at times. Yes, if you listen to it, if you understand the Spanish terms.
Did they actually get any K-pop actresses to actually play the K-pop trolls to do this, or
I don't know actually. That's a really good question. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. I don't really recognize.
Do you want to think about this? I think they probably like it. I'll be interested to see.
Oh yes, I'm looking it up, and yes, they did. The leader of the K-pop members, they are an actual K-pop group. They're a Korean girl group known as Red Velvet. So yes, they actually did get the real K-pop singers to do it. So good on them.
Here's the thing about this. Nowadays, like, you know, what our version of a movie is now no longer kind of like, you know, like in Inside Out, where if you watch my version of the movie, the father is like really into soccer, but if you watch either the American or the Canadian one, that he's actually into hockey. And but so like they regionalize these movies now. Pixar first did it, and I thought it was I really wish they hadn't done it, because now you don't really like have like what is the actual version of this movie. That, you know, the definitive version of this movie. Is it the American one? Is it the British one? Is it the Chinese one? I don't know. And I kind of thinking that once we get to, what's going to happen when the Trolls World Tour gets to Asian markets? I mean, like, is the K-pop group going to get more lines, or are they going to get more significant backing in this? In this,
I don't know. I mean, maybe they will. Maybe they'll actually have some some additional scenes, or maybe the reggaeton group will actually be maybe another K-pop group.
Yeah,
I don't know. That's actually a really good question, because they do regionalize their stuff, and
I wish they didn't do that. Like, you know, like it kind of like takes away from like, oh hey, I kind of like the idea of like the movie that you own is like the definitive version. Like it's not like changed in any particular way. Because like imagine if they like changed it up where it's like James and the Giant Peach, for example. Oh, the Peach didn't go to New York City. It went to China and sat on the Great Wall of China or something like that. And they all the Chinese kids came to eat all the all the peach and things like that. I don't know, like I really hated it that they started doing like stuff like that where they have a movie and they say, well, we're going to change the ending for every single region because we feel like it's going to basically hit that demographic. Okay. Like, I'm going to really hate the storytelling.
Now, this is something that Aaron and I are completely split on because I know he doesn't like it, but I understand why some regions have to do this so that they can be able to be culturally appropriate. Like, I can understand that. There's some parts in which
I'm not talking about being cultural. I'm not talking about cultural appropriation. I'm not talking about that at all. I'm basically just talking about, when you're aiming your product at a particular audience. So, like, instead of oh, hey, we're in Ghostbusters, for example, like, it takes place in New York, so like, we're going to chase a ball up a building, like, say for example, it doesn't, like, say for example, like, I go up to someone from China and they say, oh, do you remember the time that we watched that Ghostbusters movie in New York City? And he turns around and says, New York City? Ghostbusters takes place in Beijing. Like, imagine if we had that type of situation in a couple of years down the line. Like, you'd be kind of like, I mean, obviously it'd be an interesting conversation. It's like, oh, hey, your version of your movie is far different from mine. But still, it kind of takes away from, like, relating to someone, talking to someone about the subject matter. If you know what I'm saying.
I mean, that's fair enough. I mean, I guess, people are kind of confused about like which is the definitive version, so I can understand that. I mean, now I don't, I mean, when it releases in Asia, I mean, we don't know, how it's going to differ, but I'm actually curious. But let's get back to the story. Another thing that I have to say in terms of like the story, going back into this is that I would say that it's definitely better than the first movie, in my opinion, but not by a lot. The only reason why is because we actually like the villains better.
Yeah.
And also, very similar to the first movie, it's a jukebox musical. So there's going to be a lot of more familiar songs. And some of them were pretty good, like the rock ones. But some of them were so painful. Like when we got over to the country scene and we were just cringing so badly during the scenes in which they were singing like Who Let the Dogs Out and Gangnam Style and, Wannabe from the Spice Girls.
I'm really surprised that at least I mean, again, I don't like, we try to not any of this like it's for kids, but how much of the target audience of Trolls World Tour isn't like your mum and dad and your grandpa and grandfather and stuff like that, like all the kids who are going to be watching this? How many of them do you think actually were probably alive when Gangnam Style was kind of like there, and when Who Let the Dogs Out was like the theme of Rugrats in Paris? Don't you get the feeling that this movie is kind of told through the eyes of somebody who's been around, who kind of like thinks this is the idea of cool? It's like like rock and roll's taking over the world.
The one that really got me cringing on my seat, and I saw this in the trailer too, and I mentioned this so many times when we talked about Trolls World Tour, was that tiny troll where he was rapping and it was like, oh no, God. And every time we saw them on the screen, I was like, get them away. I hate them.
It kind of reminded me of like when Batty from Ferngully, the Lost is it the Ferngully, the Lost Rainforest, is it called?
The Last Rainforest.
The Last Rainforest, yeah. It kind of reminded me when the Batty character kind of like was introduced, and I know that was the one that Robin Williams I think preferred to instead of doing the genie in Aladdin, but
because they didn't screw him over.
No, they didn't. Yeah, exactly. But I really hate when you have rapping animated characters who look really, really obnoxious. Like, imagine, I mean, here's the thing, like, is our modern, small character that we, like, side character that I think we probably say that we never had a bad word to say off. Surprisingly, it's probably been Olaf in Frozen. The fact that he doesn't look like he's like a really loud and obnoxious character. Yeah, he can get to that point, but only within reason, when he feels like it's reason to do it and the actual, the time actually calls for it. But oh my God, like this tiny character, I think is probably the embodiment of everything we hate in this type of character. I mean,
like so bright and glittery And then the rapping, and oh my god, it was just, and no disrespect to Kenan Thompson. I love Kenan Thompson. I love him in All That and Kenan and Kel and SNL. I love the guy. Don't get me wrong, but that performance of that character was just I knew I was gonna hate that character when I saw it in the trailers, and it left me not disappointed whatsoever.
Well, if anyone thinks that Kenan Thompson has any type of standard, let me just remind you, he did Fat Albert. So like,
and Wonder Park.
Yeah, I never saw that. I saw some clips of like Fat Albert, but I never saw like anything else that he kind of like did. I'll tell you what, when Kenan went for his movie debut, and they basically were, well, mind you, before he did Fat Albert, obviously he did Rocky and Bullwinkle, but I was looking at like his early filmography, and I thought, how's this guy gonna survive? Like in not. Being looked upon and being ridiculed in certain celebrity circles, but he's on Saturday Night Live now on a regular basis. So I mean, like the joke's on us. So, he somehow jumped through all the ring of fire and managed not to get burned. So like there he is. But out of all the Kenan Thompson performances, I think we can obviously say Trolls World Tour is not one of them that we're very proud of.
Oh no, not at all. Now here's the thing: like this movie is not complete dumpster fire. Like we did enjoy some things about it. Like the one thing that I really did enjoy, other than Queen Barb, I also really enjoyed Delta Darn, the mayor of the country town, because the moment that she starts singing and it's so really sad and beautiful, and Kelly Clarkson, wonderful as always. And then Poppy comes along with her singing, and then she throws them in jail, and she was like, you stay there and you think about what you've done. And I'm like, yes, you're my favorite character. Yeah. And then when the whole thing was over, somebody yelled out, you suck. And I'm like, thank you so much. Thank you. I really do appreciate you. I usually don't like whenever they have country moments, because I'm not personally a big fan of old school country music, and I don't like too much desert settings, but that scene just made me so happy.
Yeah, here's the thing about this. In this movie, we end up rooting for the wrong characters. We really do. We end up rooting for the bad guys. We end up rooting for the characters that we really should be not very happy with, because they're getting in the way of our, supposedly protagonists. That's what makes this movie such a mess, because you end up kind of like, liking who the characters that you're not supposed to like. You end up, disliking the characters that you're actually supposed to like. You end up, disliking what you're seeing on the screen, which really should be looking really pretty and really colorful. And you just end up just feeling really distracted by the things that you shouldn't be distracted by. It's a mess.
Yeah, it is a mess. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like we said before, it's better than the first movie, but not by much.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it is better than the first movie. I will give it that. And also on top of that as well, they try to introduce like those troll characters as well, like at the very end of the movie. Like it's you kind of like end up forgetting that they're actually. It took a minute to kind of like click to like, oh, where are these characters from? Oh wait, they were in the first movie. It didn't hit me until like we were in the 5 seconds into the credits. That was in itself kind of like, if you're going to do something like that, you should have done it far sooner in the movie or something like that.
Yeah,
that's
for sure.
That's my opinion. But, yeah. And then they tried to do like a really weak, swear joke of the two, end it all off with like, oh, balls. It's like, oh, my cheese balls. Like,
that was, oh my God.
That troll can suck my cheese balls as far as I'm concerned. But, right, so, here's the thing about this as well. By the way, babe, when's this episode coming out? Is it coming out before or after we release the first episode of, that podcast?
Actually, this episode will be released after that one, because I'm going to be posting it this week.
Okay, so we can talk about it. So we were actually proposing, I was proposing that at one point we actually do this for In Search of the Crystal Skull, because like it's a movie that has some things that we like about it, but also it has some things that we actually hate about it. And on top of that as well, it's currently around the 70% region on Rotten Tomatoes, so it would have counted for that series. But obviously we needed something for Dream Machine, so something's got to give, and so So yeah, but and also on top of that as well, we already did Sonic the Hedgehog for that series as well. So like, I think that's enough modern movie. I think for now, I think we're just going to kind of concentrate on other things. So there was justification for us not to touch it, but. You never know, like, maybe there might be something we might think of, about this movie later on, and maybe we might revisit it, so who knows. But
Yeah, who knows? Yeah, so that's pretty much it for newer DreamWorks movies because, well, we already know about the pandemic. But as of the recording of this podcast, they're saying that the next movie that's going to be coming out, which is The Croods 2, that's going to be coming out around November. So yeah, again, things could change. Like they already changed the date for Soul and Raya and the Dragon. So like they moved those dates around until like either later this year or early to mid next year. So
let me say this to everybody, and I mean, like, we urge everybody obviously to stay safe during the coronavirus, and I know some people are very, very, very alarmed, concerned about some things like this, and I know we're kind of moving away from Dream Machine at this point, but let me say this. I mean, our next episode of Pix Mix is probably not going to happen until November now. And that gives you an indication. Like, if some people are actually going to be saying, like, why are you not bringing out so many episodes of Dream Machine, Pix Mix, and various other things that you want to see again? But keep this in mind, like, when DreamWorks and Pixar seem to have a very good idea of basically what's to come, I think we should all be kind of grateful that we're not talking about it as of yet, and we're basically putting this, somewhere down the line when all of this gets resolved. So,
yeah, exactly. And like we said, I mean, it could possibly come back even sooner than anticipated because, again, we don't know what the future holds for the coronavirus. I mean, it could be resolved quicker or later. We don't know. But another thing that we want to bring up just quickly is that now, if there's going to be some people who are going to be asking us, is it worth it to pay the $18 to rent this movie on demand? So that they can be able to watch it
actually double check on that because here in the UK it's actually £16 to rent out Trolls World Tour. How much is it actually in the US? I don't know if you just want to just double check that and just see how much it is actually to rent.
From what I understand from yesterday, and we actually saw this movie yesterday as of the recording of this podcast. It is on various places such as Amazon Prime and Vudu. It is $20.
$20. Oh, actually, so. I guess it's a little bit more expensive in the United States then at the minute. I mean, like, obviously the state of the economy at the minute, obviously the dollar against the pound is obviously fluctuating, but I mean, like,
sure.
At one point, I think it was actually more expensive in the US to actually rent than it was in the UK. So,
yeah.
like, hey, you got a VPN, you know what you're doing. So, like, yeah.
But yes, so the question is, would we recommend that you rent the movie if you're curious of watching it?
If you have like a curiosity in like this type of thing, I probably as Patricia says, you do you. But
yes,
I mean, like,
you do you.
Yeah, but I mean, I would not pay again to watch this. On top of that, as well, like the rental period, to my understanding, at least on YouTube, I understand, is like 2 days. So, like, you have to pay so you pay $20 to have a rental period for 2 days, and then after that, you got to pay another $20 again if your kids want to watch it. To be honest with you, like, there's, I'm pretty sure Disney Plus has like a whole range of things for your kids to watch, and all you have to do is like pay $6 a month or something like that. So, like, I would just say do that, and and unfortunately, it's kind of like what Jack Black kind of says, like, I take all the money I make from a DreamWorks film and I bet it all on Pixar for the Oscars. Okay, well, actually, there's one thing we actually wanted to mention about Trolls World Tour that we actually didn't get into, and that was actually the box office that actually gets this. Now, there is a thing to this. Now, obviously, it's streaming, but here's the thing about this: it actually it's actually, if we were actually going to the movie theater with this, I don't know, will we be paying $20 each for a ticket? I don't think.
No, I mean, like, let's just put it this way. So let's just say that if we were going on a matinee, it would be a little bit cheaper. Like maybe like $7, $8 or something, and then
Exactly, yeah.
if we want to, we could have gotten some snacks, like maybe some popcorn or some soda or something like that.
Yeah.
That would have been probably like, I mean, but if we were going on a regular day, let's just say if it was like toward the afternoon or toward the evening, then it would have probably been around maybe like $12 or $13. And again,
Exactly, yeah.
if you want to buy, refreshments again, but still, yeah. So buying it online is actually more expensive as opposed to if you were to go see it in a theater. But again, we have to put into consideration about like, hey, we need to keep the economy going because people are staying in now. So
Exactly, but I would argue for a movie like this, I mean, it's kind of overpriced. Like, saying that.
It is.
And there's even the Chicago Tribune is even doing an entire article asking, would you pay $20 to rent Trolls World Tour? Like, it's kind of like one of those things. On top of that as well, there is something I have to mention about the box office. Now, you were saying before, Patricia, that a lot of people are going to be currently staying in at the moment and obviously that's going to probably make people want to rent Trolls World Tour. Can I give you the box office number and tell you what it is? The budget for this movie is a conservative estimate of $90 million. So far, on its opening weekend, it's only managed $1.9 million.
Isn't that cute? But it's wrong!
So this is a quick correction from when we said that Trolls World Tour seems to have only done $1.9 million at the box office. I've recently read an article from Screen Rant, and I've actually been looking around the internet a little bit, and it looks like it's been a lot more higher than that, but it's not really been that better either. Keep this in mind, we said that the budget for this movie was $90 million. Right now, so far, it has only made about $50 million worth of its budget back. So, I don't know if that changes anything that we said previously, Patricia.
Not really, but hey, 1.9 and 50. I mean, 50 is definitely a lot more than 1.9.
Yeah, but one thing I would just say is that I mean, obviously it's made this money. I mean, we don't know how long it's going to be like on rental for until finally they decide, okay, you can own it outright. And so actually, this is a really interesting place to be in as well, because like when do we say that the actual box office figure ends up kind of like. Do we wait until the rental period goes out to say that this has basically been the official box office figure for the demand, or do we basically turn around and say, oh, he can make as money as he wants because it's infinitely going to be on the internet?
I mean, that's kind of hard to say, especially since, we have to also talk about when it gets released physically. Then there might be the possibility of it being re-released when the whole coronavirus thing is over. So that's kind of hard to say.
On top of that as well, we've also left the potential open for the fact that it could basically be, re-released in theaters next year. So
there you go.
There's that. So, yeah, a bit of a correction just in case anybody kind of points it out. So, sorry everybody if we offended you with $1.9 million, but that was the figure we saw at the time, but now we seem to be going around the $50 million figure instead. So,
all right. So, enjoy the rest of the show. Oof.
That's bad.
I mean, it's almost as bad as what happened to Onward.
Well, I mean, Onward made at least, hang on a second, let me have a look at the Onward box office at the end of, I would argue that, and on top of that as well, actually, I would also make the same arguments for Trolls World Tour as I would make for Onward. I would say, next year, do a re-release and get it back into theaters and see then if it starts performing, and put some additional bits in if you want to get people to go watch it. So hang on a second. So I'm looking at Onward now. The box office for Onward was actually $103.2 million. So at least it made half of its budget back.
Yeah.
That's pretty terrible. To be honest with you.
It's pretty awful.
But again, it's again, like I say with Onward, it's not its fault. It's just the circumstances it finds itself in. Every single theater across the world is currently closed. It's not going to make its money back in the theater at this present time. I would say to DreamWorks, stream it now, and then when obviously this whole thing has blown over, re-release it in theaters and make a do a special edition or something like that, or do even a rock edition and finally get those other guys to in You know the original Shrek movie? You know when they actually released it on home release, and then they added all those other bits in to, like, say, they had the karaoke dance party in the VHS and DVD releases? You know, do something like that. Like, do like, oh, hey, we've got this whole encore presentation where, you know, we have, like, all these rock legends that are going to do, like, this whole, like, you know, stage show, or, like, all these trolls doing all their favorite songs and things like that, and get all the other artists involved too, and do, like, a whole massive, like, you know, do, like, a deluxe version of Trolls World Tour and re-release it in theaters, maybe. You know, like...
yeah, or even better yet, maybe, like, add some additional scenes where you feature more music, or even additional genres of music that weren't in the movie. Like, you know, we already had pop and classical, funk, hip hop, rap, all that kind of stuff. But what about the others? What about indie rock? What about... yeah, I would love to see Polaris and the Magnetic Fields and They Might Be Giants in there. Weird Al Yankovic would be so awesome in this movie.
Funny would that would be. Well, I bet you, I mean, like, unfortunately, if DreamWorks turn around and look at this movie and think it's a failure, unfortunately, they're not going to make another Trolls movie, unfortunately. I mean, obviously,
that's true.
I mean, you got to think of this in mind, like, I mean, like, they might turn around and say, well, streaming, I mean, like, it's far more accessible than the theater. How's it not made more money? Like, and they might turn around and say, well, obviously, you know, we're not going to do any more Trolls movies. But, I mean, like...
I actually made that same argument with Onward, if you remember. I was saying, like, oh, man, what if a Pixar or Disney executive is going to be, like, looking at Onward? It's like, oh, man, you know, people are not watching this. Maybe we shouldn't be doing any more original stories. We should be going back into doing sequels again.
Going back to DreamWorks, I mean, like, again, if they look at Trolls World Tour and say, well, hang on a second, this movie is far more accessible on streaming services than it is having to get in the car, get the kids in the car, then drive all the way to the theater, and then have to organize where you're going to eat after the movie and stuff like that. Doing all that stuff, all of that's removed, and all you have to do is basically get your credit card out and pay $20 to go sit in front of your TV and then watch it for 2 days. The fact that that's not bringing money in, they might turn around and say, hey, this is a failure. You know?
Yeah, it's not Rugrats or Jimmy Neutron levels of success. It's not $100 million and Oscar-nominated film. So yeah,
exactly.
But here's the thing, like, you know, I'm actually curious about, you know, DreamWorks' future, because, you know, unlike Pixar, which are going to be releasing original projects, DreamWorks is going to be sticking to sequels for the next 4 years. Like, after Trolls World Tour, there's also The Croods 2, Boss Baby 2, and then Spirit Riding Free, which are actually going to make a sequel series based off of the animated series on Netflix.
You know,
like,
what?
Who the hell is going to watch that? Most people don't even know that series exists, unless they're like little kids or something like that. But people who grew up with the original Spirit Stallion of the Cimarron don't even know about the Netflix series. So when they hear that there's going to be a sequel to Spirit, they're going to think it's based off of this movie, not the Netflix animated series.
Exactly. Like, and to be honest with you, like, I'm starting to wonder if we should even bother with Boss Baby 2. The other one was so terrible. How can they make this better? Like,
I don't know.
I think it's like it. Let me say this: when we were doing, like, the top 5 best and top 5 worst DreamWorks films before the massive rush, before the deadline, Boss Baby was actually the worst DreamWorks film, being voted by all of you guys at one point. And it was only until, like, everyone kind of, like, jumped in and said, oh, Shark Tale's the worst one, that kind of, like, saved Boss Baby's dirty diaper, basically. So, like, you know, it's just...
Yeah, I think that was, like, toward the last day, too, because when you mentioned about the deadline, they're like, oh, no, we need to put the votes in now.
Yeah.
So... yeah, but oh man, you know, it's really disappointing that DreamWorks is going to this route in the future, because they're doing sequels based off of average to mediocre films, and one that we think is really bad.
Well, keep this in mind. Like, you know, they got the ownership has changed, of the organization has changed. So obviously their idea is to, you know, try and milk it for all it's worth, and unfortunately this is what they're doing. And so I think I guarantee you, Illumination Studios is going to be the spoilt child, I think, of, like, this whole venture that's going to be going on now. And unfortunately, I can just see DreamWorks just kind of, like, going by the wayside.
I mean, what is there to look forward to for DreamWorks over the next couple of years?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
I'm kind of like not really that excited. I mean, maybe The Croods 2, because we actually did like it okay, but it was just okay.
Yeah.
And all the other ones, it's like, I don't care. I don't want to watch Boss Baby 2.
I don't want to.
I really don't.
Yeah. It's
And as for like and here's the thing, I have not seen Spirit Riding Free, so maybe it's a good series. I don't know, but I'm not excited.
We've
for
not
it.
watched any of the DreamWorks series as far as I'm aware. I've not seen. I mean, obviously there was that Boss Baby thing on Netflix, and then there was like also I think Peabody and Sherman I think had their own series going on as well. So yeah, there's been DreamWorks series, and also on top of that as well. Oh, there was the How to Train Your Dragon one, which people have been asking us to watch. Like, you know, because apparently it's
they've
supposed
been
to be good.
requesting us to. Yeah, that's the best one. I've seen a handful of episodes because Eli Stone, aka the cartoon hero, he did a few videos on it, and he says it's the best DreamWorks animated series that they've ever done, even better than the Penguin to Madagascar. So, I think that. Well, I mean, I know that we still have a long ways to go until our next discussion of Dream Machine. So, in the meanwhile, stay tuned for what else we have coming.
Cool. So, thanks everybody for checking out this episode of Dream Machine, and take care, and bye-bye for now.
See you later.